The human fleet floated in the dark silence of space. Most ships were old and battered. Paint peeled from hulls, engines hissed and groaned, and panels flickered with failing lights. Every ship looked like it had survived one war too many. Lieutenant Rylan Keir stood on the bridge of the Artemis, staring at the holographic display that showed the approaching Xylosian swarm. His stomach tightened, and he could feel his heart thumping hard in his chest. The swarm was enormous. Millions of alien ships moved together like one living creature. Their smooth, dark shells reflected the distant starlight, and long, needle-like weapons pointed toward humanity. They did not speak. They did not hesitate. They only came, slowly at first, and then faster, like a storm rolling through space. A low humming vibration filled the floor, and Rylan could feel it in his bones. "Commander," Rylan whispered, "they are closer than the sensors predicted." Commander Valen, tall and stern, did not move his eyes from the display. "How long?" he asked. His voice was calm, but his hands gripped the edge of the console. "Shields, 20 minutes, Rylan said. His voice trembled. "Maybe less." 20 minutes. That was not much time. The human fleet was small, and most ships were already damaged. If the swarm hit with full strength, they would be destroyed before they could even respond. At the far end of the bridge, under a dusty tarp, lay an old weapon. It was small and ugly. The metal was scratched, and wires poked out at odd angles. Long ago, it had been an experimental weapon, something humans tried during the last war. Then it had been forgotten. Soldiers called it scrap metal. Scientists had laughed at it. Now, it was the last hope. Rylan walked toward it. He touched the cold metal. To anyone else, it was junk. To him, it was their only chance. He felt its weight in his hands, old but strong. He could almost hear the weapon hum faintly, waiting. "Lieutenant Keir," said Halvor, the chief engineer, "that thing is dangerous. We have no time to test it. Step back." Rylan shook his head. "There is no time. This is all we have. If we do nothing, we die." The bridge shook as the first wave of the swarm's ships came into range. Explosions lit the void as human fighters tried to intercept them. Ships melted under alien weapons, burning bright and then vanishing into the blackness. The smell of burned metal and the sound of alarms filled every corner of the ship. Crew members held onto consoles, staring in horror as one ship after another fell apart. Rylan ignored the noise. He focused on the weapon. His hands moved over wires, buttons, and levers. He remembered every lesson he had learned about old machinery, every repair he had ever done. Every move had to be perfect. One wrong turn, one misfire, and it could blow up the Artemis, maybe the whole fleet. "Power is stable," he said quietly. "Guidance arrays online. Auxiliary systems rerouted." His fingers moved quickly but carefully. He could feel sweat running down his face. His heart felt like it might burst. "We just need one shot," he muttered. One perfect shot. The swarm was almost here. Ships streaked past, lasers cutting through the darkness. Human fighters dove and spun, trying to slow them down, but many were too late. The fleet shook from the shockwaves of the exploding ships. Crew members shouted over the alarms. Fear and panic spread. "Lieutenant, status." Commander Valen barked. Rylan's hands flew over the controls. The old weapon began to glow with a soft blue light. It was alive in its own way. Sparks ran along its edges. The power core hummed louder, and Rylan could feel the energy in his chest. The swarm would be here in seconds. There was no room for error. "All systems ready," he said. He took a deep breath. This is it. He glanced back at the crew. Some stared at him in doubt. Some hoped. None fully believed the weapon could work. But hope was all humans had left. Outside, the first Xylosian ships fired. Explosions tore through the void. The humans held their breath, knowing that everything depended on this one weapon. One shot. One chance. One human. Rylan tightened his grip. He could hear nothing but the humming of the weapon and the pounding of his own heart. The swarm moved closer, faster now, a living wave of destruction. He raised the launcher. He had no idea if it would work. He only knew he had to try. For a moment, everything froze. Stars, ships, explosions, and fear all hung in the silence of space. And then Rylan pressed the trigger. The weapon glowed brighter, almost blinding. A pulse of light shot forward, small but powerful, aimed straight at the center of the Xylosian swarm. No one knew if it would be enough. But for the first time, hope felt real. The pulse of light vanished into the dark, and for a moment, nothing happened. The human fleet held its breath. The Xylosian swarm kept moving, their ships sliding forward like a living wall. Some crew members lowered their heads. Others whispered prayers. Rylan Kier did not look away. He stared at the display, his eyes wide, his hands still wrapped around the old weapon. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might break his ribs. Did it miss? Someone asked in a small, shaky voice. Before anyone could answer, the sensors screamed. A ripple of blue light spread through the center of the swarm. It did not explode. It did not burn. Instead, it moved like a wave in water, passing from one alien ship to the next. The Xylosian formation began to wobble. Their perfect lines bent and twisted. Ships slowed, turned, and then crashed into each other. What's happening? Commander Valen shouted. Rylan's hands flew over the console. Their system is breaking, he said. They think as one. The pulse hit their control link. They can't talk to each other anymore. Outside, the swarm fell into chaos. Alien ships slammed together. Some spun out of control, firing wildly into empty space. Others went dark, drifting like dead leaves in a storm. The living wall became a tangled mess. Cheers burst across the bridge, but Rylan did not smile. He knew this was only the first step. The weapon had opened a door, but the humans still had to walk through it. Sir, he said, turning to Valen, we can make it worse. If we hit them again, but from different angles, their system will tear itself apart. Valen stared at him. Can that thing fire again? Rylan looked down at the weapon. Smoke curled from its sides. Lights flickered and dimmed. The power core hummed like a tired animal. Not like this, he said. But maybe, if I change a few things. He ran. The bridge doors slid open, and Rylan rushed into the narrow halls of the Artemis. The ship shook as nearby explosions rocked the fleet. Lights blinked on and off. The floor felt alive under his boots. He reached the engineering bay and grabbed a toolbox. His hands moved fast, pulling wires, snapping open panels, and rerouting cables. He worked with whatever he could find. Old batteries. Broken circuit boards. Even parts from a coffee machine that had stopped working years ago. Chief Engineer Halvar burst in. You're crazy, he shouted over the noise. That weapon is barely holding together. Rylan did not stop. Crazy is letting them recover, he said. Help me. Halvar hesitated. Then he grabbed a wrench. They worked side by side, sparks flying as they cut and joined wires. Rylan changed the weapon's focus system, forcing it to spread its energy in smaller bursts instead of one big wave. He tied the new system into the ship's radar, so the weapon could follow the broken signals of the swarm. Sweat dripped into his eyes. His hands burned from hot metal. His ears rang from the constant alarms. But he kept going. On the bridge, the swarm began to steady itself. Some alien ships started to form new lines. Their weapons turned back toward the human fleet. Rylan. Valen's voice came over the comm, they're coming back. I need 1 minute, Rylan said. His voice shook. Just one. A blast rocked the ship. Tools fell from the table. Halvor hit the floor and groaned. Ryland grabbed the weapon as it slid toward the edge of the bench. He pulled it back and slammed it into place. Almost there, he whispered. He connected the final wire and closed the panel. The weapon hummed, louder and faster than before. The blue light returned, brighter now, sharper. Ryland lifted it and ran back to the bridge. The doors opened to chaos. Human ships were firing in every direction. Alien beams cut through the darkness. A nearby cruiser exploded, its pieces spinning away in silence. Ryland rushed to the firing platform. He locked the weapon into place and tied it into the ship's main systems. The display filled with broken signals from the swarm, like a map of cracks in glass. "This is a bad idea," someone said behind him. Ryland nodded. "All good ones are." He aimed. Instead of one point, the weapon now showed many. He took a deep breath and fired. Small bursts of light shot out, racing through space like a swarm of glowing birds. They hit the Xylosian ships in different places at the same time. The effect was instant. The alien formation collapsed again, harder than before. Ships spun, crashed, and shut down. Their weapons went silent. The swarm began to tear itself apart, lost without its shared mind. A quiet fell over the bridge. Then the humans shouted. Laughed. Some cried. Ryland leaned against the console, his legs shaking. The weapon in his hands was cracked and smoking. It looked like scrap again. But now everyone knew the truth. It was not junk. It was a human answer to a problem no one else could solve. And for the first time since the swarm had appeared, the humans felt like they might actually win. The void of space felt alive with danger. The human fleet floated among the stars, battered but holding together. Every ship shook with explosions nearby. The Xylosian swarm had recovered partially from the last strike, their alien ships forming jagged lines, moving unpredictably. The humans had slowed them, but the threat was far from over. Lieutenant Ryland Keir stood at the Artemis bridge, hands still on the weapon console. The old machine glowed faintly, smoke curling from cracks in its hull. Sparks flew as alarms screamed around him. The swarm was reorganizing. Ships twisted in space, weapons charging. A human cruiser next to them exploded, sending chunks of debris spinning toward the fleet. One hit the Artemis, rattling the deck beneath Ryland's feet. Status! Commander Valen shouted. His eyes darted from screen to screen. Ryland's voice was tense but steady. The weapon's power is stable, but we can only fire in bursts. The swarm is repairing their links. They'll coordinate again if we wait too long. The bridge crew swallowed hard. Everyone knew the weapon was fragile. One mistake and it could fail. One misfire, and the Xylosians could crush them all. Outside the hull, the alien ships shone like dark jewels in the void. They moved faster now, swarming from every angle. Tiny fighters darted around larger vessels. Each alien ship was armed with sharp, deadly weapons. The humans had shields, but the shields were weak. A direct hit would tear a ship apart instantly. Ryland took a deep breath. He could feel his chest tighten. Sweat ran down his neck. The sound of alarms, engines, and distant explosions filled his ears. The smell of burned metal from the weapon's power core burned his nose. Every sense was on edge. "Lieutenant, we are losing ships fast," shouted a weapons officer. Ryland nodded. "I know. We have to force them apart again. But this time, I need to target their command center." Valen's eyes widened. "You mean the heart of their swarm?" "Yes," Ryland said. "If we can hit it, we can break their control completely." The weapon hummed like a living thing. Blue light pulsed across the deck. Ryland adjusted dials, rerouted circuits, and focused the targeting array. Sparks flew. The crew held their breath as the old machine whined under the strain. Every second felt like a minute. The swarm drew closer. Alien beams sliced through empty space, striking human ships. One fighter went down, spinning into debris. Another barely escaped, flames trailing from its hull. The humans dodged, fired, and prayed. Ryland's hands flew over the controls. He focused on the broken signals of the Xylosian command. The weapon was old, patched together with junk and memories, but it was all humanity had. He had to make it work. "Ready," he whispered. "Do it," Valen said. Ryland pressed the trigger. Light shot from the weapon in a bright pulse. It raced across the void, small but fast, heading straight for the alien heart. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The swarm seemed untouched. Then the first wave of alien ships wobbled. Their perfect formation broke. One ship spun into another. A wave of collision sent beams and metal scattering. The command center flickered, struggling to regain control. The humans shouted and cheered, but there was no time to celebrate. The swarm was still massive, still deadly. More ships were coming from the edges of the void. The pulse had slowed them, but not stopped them. Ryland's hands were shaking. He adjusted the weapon again, preparing another burst. Every motion had to be perfect. Every calculation mattered. The Xylosians would not wait. They would attack, destroy, and consume if the humans faltered. The Artemis shook violently as another explosion rocked the deck. Crew members were thrown to the floor. Sparks rained from consoles. Valen shouted orders, trying to keep control. The other ships fired blindly, desperate to slow the swarm. Some alien ships hit human vessels directly, tearing holes through armor, spraying fire and metal into space. "Lieutenant," someone yelled. "They're adapting." Ryland's jaw tightened. "I know. We have to act faster." He rerouted power again, tapping into auxiliary cores. The old weapon groaned under the strain. It might not survive another shot. But humanity had no other choice. Every second stretched, a knife at the throat of every human crew. The void was filled with the smell of burned circuits, the hum of engines, and the distant cries of exploding ships. Ryland could feel the weight of the fleet on his shoulders. Every human alive depended on him. He fired again. Pulses of blue light streaked across the stars, hitting multiple points in the Xylosian formation. Alien ships spun, collided, and fell silent. Chaos spread like wildfire. The command links of the swarm faltered again. Some ships turned on each other in confusion. The humans held their breath, watching the slow collapse of the swarm's perfect lines. Relief was near, but danger still loomed. The swarm was enormous. Broken or not, it could strike again. Every human ship had to be ready. Ryland leaned against the console, sweat dripping into his eyes. The weapon smoked, sparks flicked from its casing. It looked old and fragile. But it had worked, for now. Humanity had survived another wave, buying precious time. The void seemed quiet for a moment. Then, from the edges of space, more alien ships appeared. Bigger, faster, hungrier. The tension tightened again. Ryland tightened his grip on the weapon. The next move had to end this. Failure was not an option. Humanity's last line of defense was fragile, patched together, but it was alive. And it would fight. The humans waited, holding their breath, knowing that every second counted. The next strike would decide whether the fleet survived or vanished into the void forever. The blue light of the weapon grew brighter on the bridge of the Artemis. Lieutenant Ryland Keir's hands were steady, though sweat ran down his face. Sparks flew from the control panel as the weapon hummed like a living thing. Outside the hull, the Xylosian swarm loomed, dark and endless, ready to crush the human fleet. "Everyone ready?" Ryland asked quietly. The crew nodded, their eyes wide with fear and hope. Some clutched consoles. Others stared at the viewport, watching the alien ships twist and move like a single creature. Commander Valen's face was pale, but his jaw was tight. "Do it," he said. Ryland pressed the trigger. A bright pulse of energy shot from the weapon into the void. It was small, faster than the eye could follow, and it streaked toward the center of the Xylosian formation. For a moment, nothing happened. Silence filled the bridge. Then, in the distance, the first alien ship wobbled. It spun, its weapons firing wildly into empty space. Another ship collided with it, tearing through its hull. A chain reaction began. One by one, ships crashed into each other. The swarm lost its perfect formation, twisting into chaos. Rylan held his breath. The weapon had done more than slow the swarm. It had hit their command link, the heart of the alien coordination. Without it, the ships were blind and confused. The human fleet watched in shock. Fires streaked across space as alien vessels collided. Small human fighters darted through the chaos, picking off isolated ships. The Artemis shook with the force of distant explosions. Crew members cheered quietly, afraid to celebrate too soon. Rylan pressed the trigger again. This time, multiple pulses shot out, each one smaller but faster than the first. They raced across the stars, hitting the broken alien ships from every angle. The swarm began to tear itself apart. Some ships spun into each other. Others fired at empty space. The command ships twitched and faltered. The humans could see it, the aliens were losing control. The bridge erupted with shouting. "It's working," someone yelled. "They can't fight back." Valen leaned over Rylan. "How? How did a scrap weapon do this?" Rylan didn't answer. He just kept firing, adjusting the aim, rerouting the power, making every shot count. The weapon's metal casing was blackened and scorched. Sparks flew from its sides. It groaned with effort, but it held together. Outside, the Xylosian swarm's lines collapsed completely. Ships slammed into each other, pieces spinning into the void. Alien weapons fired at random, hitting nothing. The humans could see their chance. The fleet surged forward, taking advantage of the chaos. Missiles fired, lasers streaked across the void, and small fighters darted between the alien wrecks. The swarm tried to regroup, but the weapon had fractured their minds. The command link was gone, and the aliens were lost. The human fleet moved as one, taking ground they had never held before. Every ship, every crew member, fought with everything they had. Rylan fired again, the last pulse before the weapon would burn out. Blue light streaked across the void, hitting the central alien ships. They erupted in fire. Hulls cracked, weapons exploded, and the largest ships tumbled apart. The remaining swarm scattered, fleeing into the dark, leaving behind wreckage and silence. The bridge was quiet for a heartbeat. Then cheers broke out. Crew members hugged each other. Some cried. The tension, the fear, the sweat, and the noise, all of it was gone, replaced with stunned relief. Valen clapped Rylan on the shoulder, his eyes shining. "You did it," he said. "You saved us all with that scrap metal." Rylan looked at the weapon. It was broken, cracked, and smoking. It had been discarded, forgotten, mocked. But it had worked. It had turned the tide against the Xylosian swarm. Humanity had survived because of it. The human fleet began to regroup. Fires still burned in space. Ships drifted, damaged but alive. The swarm was gone, at least for now. The humans had won a battle that had seemed impossible. They had survived a threat that should have destroyed them. Rylan stepped back from the console, breathing heavily. His hands were blackened with soot and sweat. Sparks still hissed from the weapon. He felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. Somewhere on the bridge, a young crew member whispered, "We're still alive, because of him." Rylan looked out the viewport. Stars glittered coldly, but the void felt less threatening now. The swarm had been beaten, but humanity had proven something more important. Even a forgotten, small weapon could change the fate of an entire species. The crew began repairs on their ships. Systems hummed back to life. Fires burned out. Human voices filled the halls again. And somewhere, Deep inside the broken blue glow of the weapon, a faint pulse remained, a reminder that human ingenuity, courage, and hope were stronger than any alien swarm. Ryland sat back, exhausted, and finally allowed himself a small smile. The fight was not over. There would always be more threats. But for now, humanity had survived, and the forgotten weapon had done what no one else could. In the cold, dark void of space, humans had struck back, and they had won. The void was quiet now. The Xylosian swarm had scattered, broken and confused, leaving the human fleet alive for the first time in days. Stars glimmered coldly, reflecting on the hulls of battered ships. Smoke drifted from engines and torn metal, but the humans were still there. They had survived. Lieutenant Ryland Keir leaned against the console of the Artemis, exhausted. His hands were blackened with soot, his clothes singed from sparks, and his chest heaved with heavy breaths. Around him, the bridge was filled with cheering and tears. Crew members hugged each other, some laughing, some sobbing, all filled with relief. They had lived through what should have been the end. Commander Valen stood beside him, eyes wide, still staring at the viewport. I don't understand, he said, shaking his head. A scrap weapon, that little thing, it did all this? Ryland wiped sweat from his brow. It wasn't the weapon, he said quietly. It was all of us. It just needed a hand to guide it. That's all humans need. One hand, one chance, and we can make anything work. Valen's eyes softened. He looked at the crew, at the damaged ships, at the broken fleet that had somehow survived. Humans, we never give up. Even when the odds are impossible. Outside, the remaining Xylosian ships drifted like wounded predators, slowly retreating into the black void. The humans fired a few last shots, ensuring they could not regroup too quickly. Every explosion reminded them how close they had come to being wiped out entirely. Ryland looked at the old weapon. Its metal was blackened and cracked. Sparks hissed from its edges. It was small, patched together from junk and old parts, something no one had ever believed in. And yet, it had changed everything. It had shredded the heart of the swarm, broken their command, and saved hundreds of human lives. A young crew member, barely 16, stepped forward. Lieutenant, that weapon, it's amazing. You saved us. Ryland shook his head. No, he said. We saved ourselves. Humans always find a way. That's what makes us dangerous. The fleet began to move. Ships slowly formed ranks, engines humming despite the damage. Teams worked to repair systems. Fires burned out. Hulls were patched. Communication channels lit up with voices, laughter, and cautious cheers. Hope was returning. Valen clapped Ryland on the shoulder. You know, he said, I think the galaxy underestimated us. Every time they do, they learn the hard way. Humans aren't just fighters. We're clever, adaptable, and relentless. Ryland smiled faintly. He could feel the exhaustion in his bones, but he also felt something stronger, pride. Humanity had survived against an enemy that should have destroyed them. And they had done it with courage, ingenuity, and a weapon everyone else had laughed at. The old, scrap metal had become a symbol. Not just of a weapon, but of human spirit. Of cleverness that could turn the tide. Of bravery that could fight against impossible odds. A communications officer approached, her voice trembling. Sir, other human fleets are asking for reports. They want to know how we did it. Valen nodded. Tell them the truth. Tell them what humans can do, even with nothing but hope and a little ingenuity. Ryland stepped back from the console and looked out the viewport. Stars stretched endlessly before him. Space was vast, dark, and dangerous, but humans had made their mark. They had survived when everything said they would fail. He thought of the weapon again, quiet and broken in the corner. It had done what no one else could. It had shredded the Xylosian swarm and given humanity a chance to fight another day. It had proven that even the smallest, weakest, or most forgotten things could matter if humans believed in them. Valen spoke again, softer now. Lieutenant, this will be remembered. Not just the weapon, but what you did. What we all did. Humanity, we are not weak. We are never weak. Rylan nodded. He did not need the praise. He could feel the truth in the silence of space and the cheering of the crew. Humans had faced death and stood tall. They had survived because they never gave up, never stopped thinking, never stopped trying. The Artemis shuddered gently as engines roared to life, leading the fleet away from the battlefield. Fires and debris still floated in space, reminders of the battle. But the humans moved forward. Stronger, smarter, and full of life. Rylan allowed himself to breathe. They had won this battle, but more would come. Yet he was not afraid. Humans had something no swarm, no alien, no force could ever take away: their will, their cleverness, and their courage. In the cold, black void, among shattered ships and drifting wreckage, humans had survived. They had triumphed. And a small, forgotten weapon, once mocked and discarded, had become a legend. The fleet moved onward, leaving the destroyed swarm behind. And somewhere deep in the quiet blue glow of the old weapon, a faint pulse remained. A reminder that humanity, no matter how small or underestimated, could always find a way. Lieutenant Rylan Keir smiled. The battle was over. Humans had triumphed. And the galaxy would never forget the day a scrap weapon shredded the Xylosian swarm.